welcome you to the official podcast of the Fish Wrapper publication, bringing you story content to inspire, encourage, and uplift the soul. It's our hope you find these stories refreshing, thought-provoking, and motivating as you face the challenges of everyday life. So turn us up and tune your ears, and let's get started by jumping right into the story.
Detected by the Camera by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Read by Deborah Mead. One summer, I was attacked by the craze for amateur photography. It later became chronic, and I and my camera have never since been parted. We've had some odd adventures together. One of the most novel of our experiences was that in which we played the part of chief witness against Ned Brooke. I may say that my name is Amy Clark, and I believe that I am considered to be the best amateur photographer in our part of the country. That is all I need tell you about myself. Mr. Carroll had asked me to photograph his place for him when the apple orchards were in bloom. He has a picturesque, old-fashioned country house behind a lawn of the most delightful old trees, flanked on each side by the orchards. I went one June afternoon with all my apparatus, prepared to take photographs of the Carroll establishment in my best style. Mr. Carroll was away, but was expected home soon. We waited for him as all the family wished to be photographed under the big maple tree at the front door. I prowled around among the shrubbery at the lower end of the lawn, and after a great deal of squinting from various angles, I at last fixed upon the spot from which I thought the best view of the house might be obtained. Then Gertie and Lillian Carroll and I got into the hammocks and swung at our leisure, enjoying the cool breeze sweeping through the maples. Ned Brooke was hanging around as usual, watching us furtively. Ned was one of the hopeful members of a family that lived in a tumble-down shanty just across the road from the Carrolls. They were wretchedly poor, and old Brooke, as he was called, and Ned were employed a good deal by Mr. Carroll, more out of charity than anything else, I fancy. The Brookes had a rather shady reputation. They were notoriously lazy, and it was suspected that their line of distinction between their own and their neighbors' goods was not very clearly drawn. Many people censured Mr. Carroll for encouraging them at all, but he was too kind-hearted to let them suffer actual want, and, as a consequence, one or the other of them was always dodging about his place. Ned was a lank, tow-headed youth of about 14, with shifty, twinkling eyes that could never look you straight in the face. His appearance was anything but prepossessing, and I always felt when I looked at him that if anyone wanted to do a shady piece of work, Ned Brooke would be the very lad for the business. Mr. Carroll came at last, and we all went down to meet him at the gate. Ned Brooke also came shuffling along to take the horse. Mr. Carroll tossed the reins to him and at the same time handed a pocketbook to his wife.
"Just as well to be careful where you put that,"
he said laughingly.
"There's a sum in it not to be picked up on every gooseberry bush. Gilman Harris paid me this morning for that bit of woodland I sold him last fall. $500. I promised that you and the girls should have it to get a new piano, so there it is."
"Thank you," said Mrs. Carroll delightedly. "However, you'd better put it back in your pocket till we go in. Amy is in a hurry." Mr. Carroll took back the pocketbook and dropped it carelessly into the inside pocket of the light overcoat that he wore. I happened to glance at Ned Brooke just then, and I could not help noticing the sudden, eager, crafty expression that flashed over his face. He eyed the pocketbook in Mr. Carroll's hands furtively, after which he went off with the horse in a great hurry. The girls were exclaiming and thanking their father. Nobody noticed Ned Brooke's behavior but myself, and it soon passed out of my mind.
"Come to photograph the place, have you, Amy?"
said Mr. Carroll.
"Well, everything is ready, I think. I suppose we'd better proceed. Where shall we stand? You had better group us as you think best.
I proceeded to arrange them in due order under the maple. It was a pretty group in a pretty setting, and I thrilled with professional pride. Then I went to my camera, slipped in the plate, gave them due warning, and took off the cap. I took 2 plates to make sure, and then the thing was over. But as I had another plate left, I thought I might as well take a view of the house by itself. So I carried my camera to a new place. I had just gotten everything ready to lift the cap when Mr. Carroll came down and said,
If you girls want to see something pretty, come to the back field with me. That will wait until you come back, won't it, Amy?
So we all betook ourselves to the back field a short distance away, where Mr. Carroll proudly displayed 2 of the prettiest little Jersey cows I had ever seen. We returned to the house by way of the back lane. As we came in sight of the main road, my brother Cecil drove up and said that if I were ready, I'd better go home with him and save myself a hot, dusty walk. The Carrolls all went down to the fence to speak to Cecil, but I dashed hurriedly down through the orchard, leaped over the fence into the lawn, and ran to the somewhat remote corner where I'd left my camera. I was in a hurry, for I knew Cecil's horse did not like to be kept waiting. I never even glanced at the house, but snatched off the cap, counted 2, and replaced it. Then I took out my plate, put it in the holder, and gathered up my traps. I suppose it took about 5 minutes in all. I had my back to the house the whole time. When I had all my things ready and emerged from my retreat, there was nobody to be seen about the place. As I hurried up through the lawn, I noticed Ned Brooke walking a smart pace down the lane. But the fact did not make any particular impression on me at the time, and was not recalled until afterward. Cecil was waiting for me, so I got in the buggy and we drove off. On arriving home, I shut myself up in my darkroom and proceeded to develop the first 2 negatives of the Carroll family. They were both excellent. The first one was a trifle better, so I decided to finish the photograph from it. I also intended to develop the third, but just as I finished the others, a half-dozen city cousins swooped down upon us, and I had to put away my paraphernalia and fly around to entertain them. The next day, Cecil came in and said,
Did you hear, Amy, that Mr. Carroll lost a pocketbook with $500 in it?
No, I exclaimed. How? When? Where? Cecil cried,
Don't overwhelm a fellow. I can only answer one question. As to the how, they don't know, and as to the where, well, if they knew that, there might be some hope of finding it. The girls are in a bad way. The money was to get them their longed-for piano, it seems, and now it's gone.
But how did it happen, Cecil?
Well, Mr. Carroll says that Mrs. Carroll handed the pocketbook back to him at the gate yesterday, and he dropped it in the inside pocket of his overcoat.
I saw him do it, I cried.
Yes,
Continued Cecil.
and then, before he went to be photographed, he hung up his coat in the hall. It hung there until evening, and nobody seems to have thought about the money, each supposing that someone else had put it carefully away. After tea, Mr. Carroll put on the coat and went to see somebody over at Netherby. He says the thought of the pocketbook never crossed his mind. He'd forgotten all about putting that in the coat pocket. He came home across the fields about 11 o'clock and found that the cows had broken into the clover hay. He had a great chase before he got them out. When he arrived home and entered the door, the remembrance of the money flashed over him. He felt in his pocket, but there was no pocketbook there. He asked his wife if she had taken it out. She had not, and no one else had either. There was a hole in the pocket, but Mr. Carroll says it was too small for the pocketbook to have worked through. However, it must have done so, unless someone took it out of his pocket at Netherby. But that's not possible. He never took the coat off, and the money was in the inside pocket. It's not likely that they will ever see it again. Someone may pick it up, of course, but the chances are slim. Mr. Carroll doesn't know his exact path across the fields, and if he lost it while he was chasing after the cows, it's a bluer show still. They've been searching all day, of course. The girls are awfully disappointed.
We hope you've been enjoying the story. We will continue in just a moment. We want to remind you that the Fish Wrapper is available by subscription. Each issue of the Fish Wrapper is jam-packed with story content, amazing recipes, games, jokes, and much, much more. Our readers never want to miss an issue. And You can order yours today by visiting www.thefishwrapperonline.com or by calling 717-400-FISH. That number again is 717-400-FISH. Now let's return and finish the story.
A sudden recollection came to me of Ned Brooke's face as I had seen it the day before at the gate, coupled with the remembrance of seeing him walking down the lane at a quick pace, so unlike his usual shambling gait, while I ran through the lawn. How did they know it was lost? I said. Perhaps it was stolen before Mr. Carroll went to Netherby.
They think not,
Said Cecil.
Who would have stolen it?
Ned Brooke, I replied. I saw him hanging around. And you never saw such a look as came over his face when he heard Mr. Carroll say that there was $500 in that pocketbook.
Well, I did suggest to them that Ned might know something about it, for I remembered having seen him go down the lane while I was waiting for you. But they won't hear of such a thing. The Brookes are kind of protégés of theirs, you know, and they won't believe anything bad of them. If Ned did take it, however, there's not a shadow of evidence against him.
No, I suppose not, I answered thoughtfully, but the more I think it over, the more I'm convinced that he took it. You know, we all went to the back field to look at the jerseys, and all that time the coat was hanging there in the hall, with not a soul in the house. It was just after we came back that I saw Ned scuttling down the lane so fast. I mentioned my suspicions to the Carrolls a few days afterward when I went down with the photographs and found that they had discovered no trace of the lost pocketbook. But they seemed positively angry when I hinted that Ned Brooke might know more of its whereabouts than anyone else. They declared they would as soon think of suspecting one of themselves as Ned, and altogether they seemed so offended at my suggestion that I held my peace and didn't irritate them by any more suppositions. Afterward, in the excitement of our cousin's visit, the matter passed out of my mind completely. They stayed 2 weeks, and I was so busy the whole time that I never got a chance to develop that third plate. And in fact, I'd forgotten all about it. One morning, soon after the cousins went away, I remembered the plate and decided to develop it. Cecil went with me, and we shut ourselves up in our den, lit our ruby lantern, and began operations. I did not expect much of that plate because it had been exposed and handled carelessly. I thought that it might prove to be underexposed or light-struck, so I left Cecil to develop it while I prepared the fixing bath. Cecil was whistling away when suddenly he gave a tremendous
Whew!
of excitement and sprang to his feet.
Amy!
I rushed to his side and looked at the plate as he held it up in the rosy light. It was a splendid one. The Carroll house come out clear, with the front door and steps in full view. And there, just in the act of stepping from the threshold, was the figure of a boy with an old straw hat on his head, and, in his hand, the pocketbook. He was standing with his head turned toward the corner of the house, as if listening. With one hand holding his ragged coat open, the other was poised in midair with the pocketbook, as if he were just going to put it in his inside pocket. The whole scene was as clear as noonday, and nobody with eyes in his head could have failed to recognize Ned Brooke. Unbelievable, I gasped. In with it, quick. We doused the thing into the fixing bath and then sat breathlessly down and looked at each other.
I say, Amy,
Said Cecil.
what a sell this will be on the Carrolls. Ned Brooke couldn't do such a thing. Oh, no. The poor boy of whom everyone had such an unlawful suspicion? I wonder if this will convince them.
Do you think they can get it all back? I asked. It's not likely he would have dared to use any of it yet. Cecil replied.
I don't know. We'll have a try anyhow. How long before this plate will be dry enough to carry down to the Carrolls as circumstantial evidence?
3 hours or thereabouts, I answered, but perhaps sooner. I'll take 2 prints off when it's ready. I wonder what the Carrolls will say. It's a piece of pure luck that the plate should have turned out so well after the slapdash way in which it was taken and used.
I say, Amy, isn't this quite an adventure?
At last, the plate was dry, and I printed 2 proofs. We wrapped them up carefully and marched down to Mr. Carroll. You never saw people so overcome with astonishment as the Carrolls were when Cecil, with the air of a statesman unfolding the evidence of some dreadful conspiracy, produced the plate and the proofs and held them out before them. Mr. Carroll and Cecil took the proofs and went over to the Brooke house. They found only Ned and his mother at home. At first, Ned, when taxed with his guilt, denied it. But when Mr. Carroll confronted him with the proofs, he broke down in a spasm of terror and confessed all. His mother produced the pocketbook and the money. They had not dared to spend a single cent of it, and Mr. Carroll went home in triumph. Perhaps Ned Brooke ought not to have been let off so easily as he was. But his mother cried and pleaded, and Mr. Carroll was too kind-hearted to resist. So he did not punish them at all, save by discontinuing to offer them the opportunities that had been theirs. The place got too hot for them after the story came out, and in less than a month all moved away, much to the benefit of Mapleton. The end.
We hope that you enjoyed this story and will join us again soon when we unravel another adventure from the pages of the Fish Wrapper. We encourage you to like and subscribe to this podcast, ensuring that you never miss a new episode. See you again soon, and may our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ guide you.